Hello and welcome to the Intentional Brief, your weekly video update on the one big thing in cybersecurity news for middle market companies, their investment teams, and executives. I'm your host, Shay Colson, managing partner at Intentional Cybersecurity, and you can find us online at intentionalcyber.com. Today is Monday, April 14th, 2025, and we're going to tackle the largest issue on the macro threat landscape head on today and talk about China. Longtime viewers of this show will know that we often remind you to focus on your controllables, to realize that you're not going to defeat a motivated nation-state adversary, and to not get distracted by these larger movements that none of us individually can control or influence. That said, that's not the same as asking you to ignore the obvious or bury your head in the sand. And the news we've seen about China in the past week or so needs to be talked through for this reason. Of course, we're all seeing the big news stories about the escalating trade war featuring tariffs on both sides of the conflict now exceeding 100%, but we also saw some China-specific cyber news in the past week that's worth digesting. First, there was a report in the Wall Street Journal that China has privately admitted to conducting attacks on U.S. critical infrastructure with their Volt Typhoon and related Typhoon campaigns. The reporting contains a few particularly interesting notes, including the fact that the disclosure was made in December to the outgoing Biden administration, and that these attacks were done in response to U.S. support for Taiwan, indicating a potential political tie to this activity. From the article, it says that, quote, the conclusion of American officials after the meeting was that the cyber attacks were meant to scare the United States from getting involved in a potential conflict between China and Taiwan, unquote. This now, of course, is more important than ever when we realize that we are in an escalated conflict with China over trade, which certainly involves Taiwan and other mechanics that could easily spill into other domains, particularly cyber. This, in fact, was the message carried in an article from last week in the Register, which cited multiple cybersecurity professionals expressing their concern about how China might retaliate for the trade war using these same Typhoon capabilities. This, of course, is a follow-on from the same theme that we've seen in others, with Reuters reporting last month that Chinese intelligence operatives were targeting laid-off federal workers to drive intelligence gathering operations, and news from Bloomberg that the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency reported to Congress last week that they have been breached for more than a year, exposing emails of 103 of their bank regulators during that time. At the same time as all of this is going on in the news, we're also seeing reporting that the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, CISA, who is in charge, of course, of defending against these threats at the government level, is reportedly facing cuts of up to half of its full-time staff and 40% of its contractors as early as this week. This comes on the heels of an executive order from President Trump targeting former head of CISA, Chris Krebs, with retribution for his assertion that the 2020 elections were, in fact, not manipulated in any way. So what should we make of all of this news? Like I said, we can't fight China and we can't set CISA policy, but we also can't ignore the fact that tensions are high, defenses are being reduced at the federal level, and we're increasingly likely to be caught in the crosshairs of this conflict. So this is your warning to make sure that you get all of those things that have been on your to-do list, on your security project list, all the things you know you should be doing but just haven't quite made time for to tighten things up. Now is the time to do those things, make those changes, put those pieces into place. Whether it's MFA or it's training and awareness or it's backups and recovery or it's patching, none of this is glamorous work, but it's more necessary now than ever, and the window to put these things in place is closing. So whether we're defending from a threat like China or related spillover efforts or other threat actors just looking to take advantage of the chaos of the moment, this is the environment we're in, and it is time for us to get to work. From a fundraising perspective, we saw more than $14.5 billion in newly committed capital last week, led by Pantheon, who raised $5.2 billion for their third private credit secondaries fund, which was great timing because the Financial Times writes in an article about secondaries funds that they're about to have their moment. The article was entitled, Private Equity is More Stuck Than Ever and Secondaries Will Benefit, and it noted that secondaries funds come in on average at 75 cents on the dollar for PE investments when they offer cash for existing stakes, which is not a bad starting place when you're looking to drive a big return. The article, of course, also notes that it does take dry powder to pull these investments off, which is why we track the fundraising every week. So expect to see more and more of these secondaries funds coming together, but also more and more of these transactions on the secondary side, which can be difficult and complex for the operations teams, the executive teams of these companies, particularly those with heavy debt loads, to run and calibrate investments, particularly in cyber. hence the conversation that we're having today. As a reminder, you can find all the links to the articles we covered in the comment section below. You can find links and written transcripts to these videos at intentionalcyber.com, and we will see you next week for another edition of the Intentional Brief.